bosun, pipe him aboard.
Aye, aye, sir.
Fire, dress ship.
Very good, sir. Dress ship!
A brief history of man's maritime mastery. Chapter 15. Mutiny on the Bounty. The night was still as the ship drifted west-northwest, her sails slack in the faint breeze. The ship, nearly at a standstill, seemed suspended in time as her sails hung lifeless from the yards, and the cords slotted softly against the masts. The gentle creaking of the blocks and the faint chuckle of water at the bow were the only sounds that broke the silence of an oily sea. Overhead, the trucks of her mast traced slow arcs against the blazing stars of the southern hemisphere, while the moon, just a sliver in her first quarter, bathed the ship in a faint, pale, ghostly glow. 10 leagues away, under the brilliant blue-white star Vega, the volcanic peak of Tofua rose ominously from the dark sea. As 8 bells struck, marking the dawn of a new day, Fletcher Christian, acting mate of His Majesty's armed vessel Bounty, stepped onto the deck to relieve the watch. Below deck, the ship's commander, Lieutenant William Bligh, was fast asleep in his cabin, unaware of the treachery that was about to unfold. Bligh would later write, "I am now unhappily to relate one of the most atrocious acts of piracy ever committed. Just before sunrising, Mr. Christian, with the master-at-arms, gunner's mate, and Thomas Burkett, seaman, came into my cabin while I was asleep. Seizing me, they tied my hands with a cord behind my back, and threatened me with instant death if I spoke or made the least noise. I, however, called so loud as to alarm everyone, but they had already secured the officers who were not of the party." Christian, armed only with a cutlass, had orchestrated the mutiny with cold precision. The others, brandishing muskets and bayonets, dragged Bligh from his bed and forced him onto the deck in nothing but his shirt. The boatswain was then ordered to hoist the ship's launch, with the threat of death hanging over him if he hesitated. As the men were hurried over the side, Bligh concluded that he, too, was to be set adrift. So, on April 28, 1789, began one of the most infamous sea stories of all time, the mutiny on the Bounty. The Bounty had set sail from Spithead in December of 1787, under orders to proceed to Tahiti, the jewel of the South Seas, to collect breadfruit plants for transport to the West Indies as food for slaves. For nearly 6 idyllic months, the crew basked in what Bligh called the finest island in the world, their hearts stolen by the island's beauty and the charms of its people. But as the ship departed Tahiti and made for the Torres Strait, tension simmered beneath the surface. Off the coast of Tofua, the tension erupted into open rebellion. When Bligh returned safely after the mutiny, he became the talk of England, hailed as a hero and a martyr for his incredible feat of navigation, an open-boat journey of some 3,618 nautical miles in 41 days to the island of Timor. But public opinion soon shifted. Bligh, once celebrated, was now often depicted as an unendurable martinet. There is no doubt that Bligh's caustic tongue and irascible nature had stung many, not least of all Fletcher Christian, who left no written record of his grievances. But a crewman recalled that at the moment of mutiny, Christian had confronted Bligh, saying, "I have been in hell this fortnight, and am determined to bear it no longer. I have been used like a dog all this voyage." Bligh, for his part, attributed the mutiny to the irresistible allure of Tahiti's handsome, mild, and cheerful women, a paradise where his men no longer wished to labor. Bligh did eventually return to Tahiti and successfully transplanted breadfruit to the West Indies. Yet, in a final twist of irony, the breadfruit, brought to the Indies at the steep cost of mutiny, piracy, shipwreck, murder, and exile, was deemed tasteless by the slaves it was meant to feed. They refused to eat it, sealing this tragic tale with a bitter end. On the other side, for Fletcher Christian, this mutiny also brought him and his men nothing but trouble. After setting Captain Bligh adrift, they sought refuge on a remote island of Tubuai, some 400 miles south of Tahiti. But what they found was far from the paradise they imagined. Hostile natives kept them in a constant state of war, and dissent grew among the mutineers. Many demanded a return to Tahiti, where they could secure women without force and perhaps regain some semblance of peace. Christian, feeling his authority slipping away, made a desperate offer to his men. "Gentlemen, I will carry you and land you wherever you please. I desire none to stay with me, but I have one favor to request, that you will grant me the ship, tie the foresail, give me a few gallons of water, and leave me to run before the wind. I shall land upon the first island the ship drives to. I have done such an act that I cannot stay at Tahiti." Christian knew all too well that the Admiralty's reach was long and relentless, and that sooner or later they would send a ship to hunt him down. Reluctantly, he took the mutineers back to Tahiti. 16 of them elected to stay, but Christian's worst fears were soon realized. Just a year and a half later, an Admiralty ship arrived, capturing all the mutineers on the island, except for 2 who had been killed. The rest faced grim fates, but not Christian. With 8 other mutineers, 6 native men, 12 women, and a little girl, Christian vanished into the vast Pacific, disappearing from the known world. It wasn't until 18 years later that the mystery of Fletcher Christian's fate was finally unraveled, when the American ship Topaz out of Boston touched on the remote and lonely Pitcairn Island, 1,300 miles southeast of Tahiti. The crew expected to find an uninhabited outpost. Instead, they were greeted by a surprising sight: a flock of women and children and a lone, aging Englishman, the sole survivor of Christian's band. From this solitary figure they heard a tale steeped in violence, tragedy, and the grim reality of life after mutiny. After slipping out of Tahiti, Christian and his fellow mutineers sailed for weeks, searching for a deserted island where they could live without fear of discovery. As tensions rose once again, nearly leading to a second mutiny on the Bounty, Christian finally sighted Pitcairn Island in 1790. It seemed to be the perfect sanctuary. They landed with their stores, plants, and livestock brought from Tahiti, stripped the Bounty of her useful parts, and then set her ablaze, watching as their last link to the outside world sank beneath the waves. Christian then divided the island into 9 portions among the Englishmen, leaving none for the Polynesian men. Resentment simmered, and 2 years later it erupted into violence. The catalyst was a woman, the wife of one of the mutineers who had died in a fall from a cliff. The widower claimed the wife of one of the Tahitians, igniting a fierce and bloody conflict. The Polynesians banded together, seeking revenge, and the ensuing years were marked by a series of violent deaths. Fletcher Christian met his end as he worked in his field, shot down by one of the enraged Tahitians. Another mutineer, driven mad by grief and alcohol, threw himself into the sea. 10 years after the Bounty landed, all the Tahitian men were dead, and of the mutineers, only the one discovered by the Topaz had survived. A solitary reminder of a dream turned nightmare, and a mutiny that led not to freedom, but to ruin.